How's it going, Mateo? So, per your request, I'm going to run through all the logic inside my interaction system. There is a ton of logic and it's very complicated, so this might not be a short video, but I hope it helps you out and anyone else that wants to know how I set all this up. In my game, I have three different heights of cupboards for the player to interact with. I have a high one, a middle one, and a low one, and so this one is going to be the middle one because I've gone ahead and commented everything so it's a little easier to follow. So the first thing that I did is I set up a trigger zone for the player to interact with. So once he's inside this trigger zone, that means he can interact with it. And then I also set up a cube here where I want the player to move to. And I basically just named that move to, and I have it set so that it's invisible while the game is running and that there's no collision on it. It's just a place for the player to move to. So once I did that, I went for the trigger box. I have an overlap detector. So basically, once the player overlaps it, the trigger box is going to ask and see if the player has tag player, which I've set up here in my character's blueprint. If you type in tag, you can add the tag player so that it knows. And so if that variable is true, we're going to set that the player is detected, and then we're going to pull out of the other actor that it's detected and cast to the player character to pull variables out of it. So you might not need this logic for yours, but basically I have a camera switcher. So whenever the character is detected, it's going to make the camera switch so that it's a little closer to the cupboard, and so it's easier for the player to see what they're looting. But then after that, I have it set. This is where I tell other blueprints which type of cupboard it is, which one that the player is interacting with. So since it's the mid cupboard, I have it right here. So it's detecting the mid, and then I basically tell it that it isn't the other ones. It's not the low or the high. And then from there, once the player has hit the interaction button, I have it on a flip-flop. So the first time it plays it, it's going to open up the doors, and then the second time it's going to close the doors, just like that. But then I have a variable which I set here that it's interacted with. This you don't need to you won't need. This is basically for a replication for my game, so we can ignore that. But the first real thing that we do is we set the location of where this cube is, where the player is going to move to. We tell the player to holster their gun, which I have. If I click in here, this is the logic for it. It's basically just saying take the current weapon that the player has equipped, and then play the montage of it being holstered. And then basically this is where it calls the delay for the holster. This is just for like while the animation's playing, wait this amount of time before you actually holster the weapon. And then this you don't gotta worry about, that's for my game. But once the gun's been holstered, then I tell the player to move to its location, since I set it there. And then it's also going to rotate towards that location. So if we click on move to cupboard, it's going to take us to my character's blueprint. And I basically have it so I sent those variables through this. And then basically it disables the character's movement right here, so that so while it's moving, you're not able to like actually control the character with the thumbstick. And then we tell it how fast we want the character to move to. That's where we set the speed for the character movement component, which should be down here. Yeah, character movement right there. You would just drag that in and then set the speed that you want it to go to. And then this is where the actual move to function is. It's this simple move to location. And then basically I just took the location and I fed it into the goal for the player controller to move to. And then, so yeah, after that, let's see. Let's go back to our cupboard here. So once, oh yeah, so that was the movement. Let's move to the rotation. Oh goodness. So for the rotation of the actor, this was very difficult for me to figure out because I kept running into the issue where the character would start to rotate, but it wouldn't take the shortest path to the rotation. Sometimes it would like take the long rotation path and he'd do some weird movements. So this is kind of my special recipe on how to get like smooth movement and for it to take the shortest path. Basically, I have a timeline here, which is the length of however long I want the movement to take place. And it just goes from 0 to 1. And then I have it going into a set actor rotation with the character reference as the target. And then this is the magic recipe right here. Basically, you take the player character, you get their rotation, you feed the Z-axis into a lerp rotator. This is the starting position. And then you also get the actor's location, you find their look at rotation, and then you plug this into the start, and then you get the location of where you want the character to look at. So for my game, it's actually the back of the cupboard. Let's see. Yeah, so back of the cupboard, that's where I want the character to look at. And so I basically just took that, and then I got its location, and then out of the look at rotation, I just fed it into the Z. So this is the start, this is the end, and then I plugged the float value from the timeline into the alpha channel, and then fed that into its new rotation. So yeah, there's that. And then here I do a couple checks. So if my character, well, we'll just call this character, the character in my game's called John, we'll just call it player. So if the player is crouching, we're pulling from the character reference and we're finding out if he's crouched or not. So if he is crouching, then we're going to force him to stand because this is the mid-height covered. We want him to be standing. And then we just call this function to uncrouch. And then, so this is the delay time before my character actually reaches the door. So we just want to wait 0.8 seconds before we play the open the door animation. So we click this. This is the animation that will be played for the cupboard doors opening. And then after they're done opening, we can re-enable the player character's movement because, you know, while he's opening, we want the character to be, you know, stood still there. That way it doesn't like move around. And then the animation plays when he's not actually like facing the cupboard. And then let us go here real quick to kind of show you. So that is where I do the reset for this player move to inside the character blueprint. Once it calls it, it's going to stop the movement of the character, and then it's going to do this once where it resets the regular walk speed for like the default walk speed for the character and enables the ability to move again. So we'll go back here. And then after all that, after the doors are opening, we have this animation to play of the actual character opening the doors, right? So we have the doors the animation of the doors opening, and we have that synced with the time of the character opening the door animation. And then that variable of interacted with that we set to be true, that means, you know, that the character actually interacted with it. Then it's going to start the searching animation. So I just have an animation here where I'll open it real quick, just kind of showing that he's looking through the cupboard, right? And then I guess I'll go through this too. So if you went ahead and set up some layered blend per bones inside the animation blueprint of your character, you can kind of specify which part of the body that you want to do certain animations. So I want the animation to apply to the head, both arms and the spine, but I don't want to apply it to the legs because at this point the player can actually move around inside the game, but it will still play that like searching through animation until it leaves the trigger zone. Then it'll stop playing that animation. So we'll go back here. So yeah, and then on this bottom half for the closing part, because you open it the first time, and then once you press it again, it will close. And the only difference that I have here is that it doesn't play the searching animation, and then this animation here, this is actually not the opening animation, but the closing animation. So that's him closing the doors right there. So yeah, so that's the basic interaction for opening and closing the doors. And then, so for the actual item pickups, that's where it starts to get a little bit more complicated because there are a ton of variables. So let me just give you an example here. So I have this item that's on the desk, and I have this item that's on the ground. Inside the blueprint, what I've done is I set up a couple of variables that are instance editable, which means that I can edit them live inside the actual level editor, and they'll take change inside the blueprint. So let's say this one that's on the ground, right? I made a variable for if on ground make player crouch, and I set it to true. And then for this one that's on the desk, I have make reach up if crouched, set to true with everything else false. And then if we go into one of these cupboards here and see, yeah, we'll grab this key right here. So in that blueprint, I have it so make reach up if it's a middle, because it is the middle cupboard. And then I also have force player to stand to grab it. So if they're crouched, they're going to be forced to stand before they can grab that item. And so once we hop into the actual blueprint itself, so this is just give you an idea of what the blueprint looks like, but don't worry about it because the only stuff that we really need starts right here. So the first thing, once the player has hit the interaction button, once they're in range, I have it so it's cast to the player character and sets the reference. And then the first question that I ask is the item that they're picking up a weapon or is it something else? So if it's a weapon, it's going to follow this string. If it's any other item, it's going to go through here. And then the next question I ask is the player crouching? So if the player is crouching, we can go through here. And then that's where that variable, the instance editable variable, takes place. So if I checked if on ground make player crouch. So if I had that checked inside the level, it would follow this string. Or if they were forced to crouch, we go to we pull out of the player character blueprint, and then we set the variable forced to crouch. And then I'll show you where that leads to in a bit. But once we set that variable, we can set the world location of wherever the item is. So I basically just took the static mesh of the item, I got its world location, and then I set that variable, the X, Y, and Z variables for that location. So the character knows where to move to. We can ignore this because this is like my camera system here. But then we take the player character and then we set a bunch of values inside of that blueprint. So we're setting the value for attach hand delay time, so how long it takes before the item gets attached to the hand, which is half a second. We tell it which item to attach to the hand, which is the blueprint itself, so I just set a reference to self. And then we also tell it which animation to play. So if they were forced to, pick up an item on the ground, we want it to only play this animation, which is this one right there. Okay, let's go back to the world item. But then once we've set those variables, we told how long to delay, which item to attach, and which animation to pick up. We tell it to actually play the animation by calling this event right here inside of the player character blueprint. So I'm going to double click this, and that's going to take us to where all of this is taking place at. So the first thing we want to do is once the animation is playing, we want to disable the interaction button because we don't want the character to be able to interact with other objects while the animation is playing, because then that can mess things up. So we set that to true, and then I'll actually take you to where that is at. So here is the interaction button for the player to press, and it goes through here. So the first thing that we're doing is we're telling it that we can't interact anymore once the animation starts playing. And then I just have this variable here to give me the options. Basically, it's asking if the character should be completely still while they're interacting with the item, which I don't have any set up for my game right now because I want the character to be able to move while they're pocketing stuff. But I have that option here if I wanted to use it. But then we'll just follow the false through here. And then we ask if the player was forced to crouch. If they were forced to crouch, we're going to holster the weapon. We're going to tell the character to move to the cupboard, which is right here. It's the exact same one that we used for the move to the cupboard, the same event. And so it's going to, move the character to the location. And then we also set its speed right here too. So we set it when he's moving to the item, it's going to be a little bit slower than his normal speed. And then we have a delay here for the crouching animation. So this is how long it takes for the animation of him crouching. And then we pull the variable delay time till pickup, and we set that in here. So it's setting the delay time for the character to walk to the item. So this is how long it takes for the character to move to the item. And then this is the animation that gets played once they get to the item. So back in our world item, when we told it to play this animation, we were telling it right here that this is the animation we want to play. And so it's pulling from that pickup animation to play, and it's playing that animation right there. And so this was the attached to hand delay time that we set in here as well. So this is, we told it how long we want it to take before the item gets attached to the hand. And so it's pulling that variable as the delay. And then this is where it actually attaches the item to the hand. So we took, I'm just flipping back and forth here, but we told it that we want it to attach itself. So it's attaching that blueprint to the hand, to the character mesh, and it's attaching it to this socket that's inside of the character mesh, which would be the right hand socket. And I basically just have the location rules set to snap to target. And then we ask, once the item's been attached, was the player forced to crouch? If they were forced to crouch, we want to re-enable the movement. So once it's attached to the hand, the player can move around again. And so if we call this here, this is where it's telling, so yeah, once the characters reach the location, it stops the player immediately, so they can't move around. And then then we set the regular walk speed again, and then we tell the character that they can move around again. We set that to true. So after that, we take the delay time for the pocketing animation. So this is how long it takes for the character to pocket the animation. And we need to know that because we need to know when we're going to destroy the actor and make it disappear from the scene. So we set that right there. And so after we destroy the actor, depending on which animation is played, the pocketing animation length will vary. So here is what I reset the variable to its default time right there, which is the default time for destroying the actor. And then here at the very end, I reset a couple variables. I basically make it so the player can press the interaction button again once the animation is finished, and then I reset the variable for force to crouch, which I believe, yeah, so we're resetting that, yeah, right here. So false is the default value for that. And so this would basically just be like their standing animation right here. But we still set the same animation for the standing and the crouching, but we just set it inside of the world item blueprint, whichever animation gets set. So yeah, I think that pretty much does it. It's inside of the world item where you can get as crazy as you want to with the different variables. So this one is like if you interacted with the high cupboard, it would play this animation and set these variables here. This is for the mid cupboard. This is for the low cupboard. And then this is like the default pickup animation. Like if this is going up to like a desk or something, this is one that will play. Yeah, I think that pretty much does it right there. That should do it for most of the stuff. Let's see. So this one is the variable if we want to force them to stand, right? So we have the force to grab, which is right here, or force to crouch, and then we also have force to stand, and it would play the force to stand, and then it would play those animations right here. And there's just a couple more variables. If it interacted with like a mid cupboard, oh no, this is for the shelves right here. So this is yeah, so this is like let me show you real quick. Let me go back. So yeah, inside of this middle cupboard, I basically have like a shelf divider right here. And so I have it set, here, let me go inside of here so we can take a look. Let me grab this. And then, let's see, we grab the top key, actually. Okay, so here it is. Here's where that make reach up if mid variable takes place. It's basically playing two different animations for the bottom shelf and the top shelf. So if you grab that off the bottom, it would play the normal like mid pickup animation, but if they grabbed it off the top shelf, it would play pick up, reach up if mid, and that is the variable inside the blueprint right here. It would play this reaching up animation. But yeah, I hope that wasn't too hard to follow, and I hope it helps you out some. And yeah, hope you have a good one. Take care, man.